Chapter 1. Dad, Mom, I've agreed to go study abroad. Hearing their son finally concede, his parents' voices on the other end of the line across the ocean were full of relief. Ethan, you've finally seen the light. A huge weight has been lifted off our chests. You get ready for the next few weeks, and your dad and I will make the arrangements. We should be able to reunite as a family in about a month. Unlike the two elders' relaxed and cheerful tone, Ethan's was low and flat. I understand. After a few perfunctory exchanges, the call ended. Outside the window it was pitch black. Ethan didn't turn on the lights, and his slightly reddened eyes didn't betray much emotion. Half an hour later, footsteps approached the door. Ethan didn't get up to greet the visitor as he normally would, but quietly watched as the harsh overhead light was turned on. After changing her shoes and entering the living room, Serena noticed Ethan leaning against the sofa. She raised her eyes slightly and asked, "Why aren't you asleep yet? I was waiting for you. Didn't you see the messages I sent?" His tone wasn't the friendliest, but Serena didn't seem to care. She casually made up an excuse. "I was in the lab all day. I didn't have time to look at my phone." With that, she ignored whether or not he believed her, and took off her coat before heading into the bathroom. Shortly after, the sound of water running filled the air, and her phone, which she'd carelessly left on the coffee table, started to ring. Remembering the things she'd heard during the day, Ethan's hands, clasped together, trembled slightly. He leaned forward and picked up the phone, skillfully entering the password to open it. The messages were from a boy with a blue bear profile picture, under the name of Liam Meng. "Serena, thanks for the treat today. I'm home now." Looking at the intimate tone, Ethan swiped up. He saw entries from 9 p.m. last night. "I'm returning to the country today. Will you come pick me up?" There was no time difference between the two messages, obviously a lightning-fast reply. Address. Last night, Serena returned at 8:50, took a shower, and didn't come out until an hour later. So she was replying to messages, was she? Ethan's eyelashes fluttered slightly as he pursed his lips. Then he went back and opened the chat log with the contact named Ethan Zhou. From "remember to bring an umbrella because it's raining today," to "rest reminder during lunchtime," to a few photos of supermarket shopping carts and a random picture of a cute dog by the roadside. A glance revealed countless white chat boxes, dozens upon dozens of them. All the messages were from him to her, and she hadn't replied to a single one. The stark contrast made his so-called boyfriend status all the more pathetic. Whether it was because he had decided to leave, or because he had truly let go, Ethan didn't feel any pain as he became aware of all this. He gently placed the phone back where it was, his mind in turmoil. Ethan thought back to the first time he saw Serena. At the freshman orientation ceremony, she'd given a speech as the new student representative. Her stunning looks quickly took over the confession boards within a minute, and earned her the title of Campus Belle. Over the years, boys who chased after her were like a swarm of bees, each trying their hardest to reach past the gate and pluck this untouchable flower. But she was naturally cold and aloof, looking down even at the school's most handsome boy, breaking many hearts in the process. Ethan, wholeheartedly devoted, was naturally rejected, but he was more persistent than the other boys. The more she rejected him, the more persistent he became. Perhaps heaven rewarded his determination. After a year of effort, and having confessed 20 to 30 times, he finally became Serena's official boyfriend. But even after they got together, she was never affectionate towards him, still not replying to messages, not answering calls, and stingy with words when she spoke. Ethan, having achieved his goal, wasn't discouraged by her indifference. Instead, he became even more proactive in maintaining the relationship. Even after 3 years of dating, he had formed a stereotype in his mind that Serena was simply a cold person by nature. That was until not too long ago, when his laptop broke and he borrowed hers. He accidentally clicked on a folder and saw thousands of photos of the same boy. He secretly copied a picture and asked some close friends about him, and finally learned some information. The boy that filled Serena's digital space was Liam Meng, her childhood friend and playmate. Although several peers hung out together in the same circle, those two were particularly close. Some said Serena liked Liam and was ready to confess after the college entrance exam, but he had shut her down with the phrase, "We'll always be good friends." Then Liam was sent to study abroad by his family, while she got into Hua University, and the two were separated. After learning all this, Ethan understood that she wasn't naturally cold. It was just that no one was worth her attention. For the last half a month, he'd been in a daze, always wanting to find an opportunity to ask if she had truly moved on from Liam. But before the words could leave his mouth, he'd heard another piece of news by chance. Someone told him that Serena had only agreed to be with him as a way to forget Liam. She wanted to use a new relationship to fill the hole in her heart that was filled with Liam. If Liam wasn't in the picture, Ethan would have been willing to warm her up for another 10 years, because he was always the only one she publicly acknowledged. But after discovering Liam's existence, Ethan, who hadn't given up even after being ignored for 3 years, felt exhausted for the first time and wanted to let go. He didn't want to be a tool for Serena to forget someone else. He didn't want to wait for a woman who was constantly pining for her white moonlight. So he decided to leave secretly, without letting her know. Chapter 2. At 11 o'clock, the alarm went off and Serena finally came out of the bathroom. She dried her hair while picking up her phone to go into the study. Seeing that she wasn't planning to rest, Ethan frowned slightly. Serena had a regular routine and never stayed up late. This alarm was a reminder to go to bed. Ethan stood up, unable to help but ask, "It's late, aren't you going to bed?" Serena's fingers were flying across the screen, her eyes fixed on her phone without looking at him. "I still have some assignments to finish. I'll go later." After 3 years together, it was the first time Ethan had seen Serena like this. She had only come home at 10:30 in order to meet Liam, and she wasn't going to rest when it was time. She could come up with any excuse to brush him off. Ethan didn't expose the clumsy lie, and quietly turned around to go to his room. Across from his bedroom was the study. He could clearly see what was happening inside. The woman who claimed she had assignments was glued to her phone, not even shifting her gaze, a slight smile always on her face. After so long together, it was the first time Ethan had seen Serena so happy. It was somewhat surreal. So even the coldest iceberg can melt when facing someone they like, can it? It wasn't that she was incapable of loving someone. It was that she didn't love him. Ethan closed the door and smiled silently. Anyway, after he left in 30 days, Serena would be able to pursue the person she loved without any reservations. Since he had decided to let go, why was he tormenting himself? The next day was a nice day, and Ethan went out early to buy breakfast. When he got back, Serena had just woken up. The two ate breakfast together at the table, and then she grabbed her coat, planning to leave. Thinking of the agreement from last week, Ethan still stopped her. "It's Saturday today. We were going to see the sunset at Chiwe Mountain, weren't we?" Serena's hurried steps paused. "My advisor gave me some last-minute tasks. I can't go." Ethan silently swallowed the bread in his mouth and nodded. Seeing that he wasn't speaking, Serena added, "I'll take you next time. I should be free next month." If the old Ethan had heard her say those words, he would have jumped for joy. But the current Ethan didn't show any expression, and simply hummed. The huge difference made Serena feel like something was off. She glanced at the calendar on the table and started a topic of conversation. "When did you buy the countdown calendar? Is there anything important in 30 days? Looking at the red mark 30 on the page, Ethan reached out, ripped off a page, and the number instantly changed to 29. "I bought it this morning. I have some important things to take care of in a month, so I'll use it to remind me every day." Hearing that his tone wasn't unusual, Serena didn't ask more. She walked to the entrance, put on her shoes and opened the door. "I'll bring back some pear tarts later. You rest well at home." The end of her sentence was swallowed by the sound of the door closing. Ethan chuckled quietly, his eyes slightly reddened. After finishing breakfast, he pulled out a large bag and started clearing out the things in the apartment that he didn't need, planning to throw them away later that night. Matching mugs he had bought a long time ago and hadn't ever used, various types of razors, an empty photo frame he had bought to display their pictures. One by one, all of them were things he had carefully chosen, but Serena had never used them. It was as if he had set up the apartment as a home, but she only saw it as a dorm, a hotel, never putting any heart into it. But it didn't matter. He wouldn't need these things later, And once he left, she would surely move out, leaving the apartment empty. All the memories of the two of them would be wiped away. Chapter 3. Lost in his work, it was dark before he knew it. After dragging the bag full of trash to the bin and throwing it away, Ethan finally had some free time. He leaned against the sofa, resting, and picked up his phone to check his moments. The latest post was a sunset photo from a boy with a blue bear profile picture. In the center was a girl's silhouette. The hand reaching out held a box of pear tarts. Looking at the stunning sunset on the screen, Ethan's eyes flickered. Liam's contact information was something that he had only obtained by secretly contacting many people behind Serena's back. After adding him one day, he saw Liam post on his moments saying, "I really miss the pear tarts from back home," and he understood why Serena liked to buy the dessert for him so much. Slowly, he discovered even more clues. The laundry detergent that she insisted on using, the flowers that she gave him, the decorations that she bought for the house. Ethan could find the same things in Liam's moments. Serena was clearly with him to forget Liam, but she ended up being consumed by him, treating Ethan as nothing more than a substitute. Thinking about this, Ethan sighed softly, his eyes flashing with complex emotions. Perhaps because he had been sad so many times, there was no sadness within those emotions. He covered his slightly tight chest, got up, opened the fridge, and took out some cucumbers to slowly munch on. The clock on the wall ticked on and on. It was close to midnight again when Serena came home. Her hands were empty, and she seemed to have forgotten her promise before leaving. She came in, looked around, and frowned. "Does it feel like something's missing in the house? I threw out some things I don't need this afternoon." Serena nodded, slowly unbuttoning her cuffs, not really paying much attention to the matter. Watching her slender figure, Ethan lowered his eyes. If she had only looked carefully, she would have noticed that many of the missing things were items he used every day. With her intelligence, she could easily guess that he was planning to leave. But her heart and mind were only filled with Liam. It was reasonable that she wouldn't notice these subtle changes, wasn't it? After all, who would pay attention to the unusual behavior of a boyfriend who was more like a roommate? He was just making fun of himself when Serena suddenly asked him a question. "Where can I get something with Liamong customized? I don't know too much about trendy things." Liam had just posted about them yesterday evening. Today, she was already thinking about getting one for him. Ethan was stunned for a moment before answering. "Liamong is a new trend, so it's hard to find someone reliable to make them for you. But, as it happens, I know how. I can make one for you." Hearing that he could, Serena looked slightly taken aback. She seemed to think that it wasn't right for a boyfriend to be making something for a guy that she liked. But perhaps because she wanted Liam to be happy, she nodded in the end. "I'll send you the exact style and the requirements." Ethan hummed and turned to leave, not letting her see the redness in the corner of his eyes. In the dead of the night, he stayed up all night copying designs from Liam's moments and finished it. Before Serena went out, he handed the Liamong to her. Seeing his reddened eyes, her face showed a rare hint of heartache, and she thanked him in a low voice. Ethan shook his head, his voice filled with exhaustion. "You don't have to thank me. As long as you like it." Serena didn't insist on being polite, turned around and left the room. Watching her unhesitating back, Ethan's lips moved slightly, and he uttered a soft, barely audible phrase. "Consider this a final gift to the two of you before I leave." After he left this time, Serena didn't return that night. She hadn't noticed anything unusual. Other than classes, she was spending her time with Liam, returning home early in the morning and leaving late, and sometimes not even seeing Ethan at all. Ethan also didn't disturb her. He kept packing up his luggage and belongings, and the room was getting increasingly empty. A few days later, as he was checking through his winter clothes, he suddenly got a phone call. "Ethan? Serena is drunk. Could you come pick her up?" Serena was drunk? She didn't drink at all, did she? Ethan frowned but didn't think too much about it. He grabbed his phone and went downstairs to hail a cab. The place wasn't too far away. 20 minutes later, he found the private room based on the address he had received. The door was slightly open. He pushed it open and immediately saw Serena slumped into the arms of a boy. They were whispering closely together, like a couple very much in love. Chapter 4. Seeing this ambiguous scene, Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He took a deep breath and walked over, extending his hand to Liam. "Hello, I'm Serena's boyfriend, Ethan Joe." Hearing this, Liam shook his hand, pushed Serena away, and attempted to shake her awake. "Serena, your boyfriend is here. Wake up." Serena, with a flushed face, leaned back into Liam's arms again, hugging his hand while murmuring the words, "You're my boyfriend." Everyone in the room looked embarrassed, but Ethan's expression was calm as he took out a few capsules from his bag and offered them. "She's drunk. I brought some hangover medication. Let her sober up before we go." After swallowing the pills, Serena actually sobered up. She looked up and saw Ethan's face, hurriedly scrambling out of Liam's arms to explain. I mistook him for someone else." Ethan didn't say anything but just smiled. "I know. Let's go home." Serena agreed and picked up her coat, about to leave, but several of her friends, who were also obviously drunk, blocked her way. "Why are you leaving so soon? Serena, you're always caught up in those experiments and assignments. You barely hang out with us once a year. We finally managed to get you out here today using Liam's name. Don't be a deserter." Yeah. Our game is about to start. It's not fair if you leave now." The girls ignored whether she wanted to or not, dragged her down to sit, and started explaining the rules of the game. "We'll play big today. Russian roulette. The person who is pointed at has to reveal a secret in public." Serena seemed unwilling to leave and glanced at Ethan, but his face was devoid of any emotions. "Since we're here, let's play," he said. Hearing her agree, her friends started cheering and the game began. On the first round, Serena was the unfortunate one to be chosen. Everyone immediately became excited. Ha, we finally got you, Serena. But since it's your first time playing, we'll keep the punishment light. Let's see your contacts and see who your pinned contact is." It was indeed a light penalty, but Serena remained silent. The girls started making a fuss. "What's the point of this? Serena has a boyfriend. It must be her boyfriend that she pinned." Seeing someone backing them up, Serena remained indifferent. "Since you all know, there's no need to look at it. Let's do something else." Some of them still insisted on it and, catching her off guard, snatched her phone. They opened it and saw the name Liam Meng. The people in the room just stared at each other, speechless. Serena didn't offer any explanation, took her phone, stood up and walked out. "You guys can play. I'm going to the washroom." She was gone for more than 10 minutes. Ethan, afraid that she might have thrown up, followed her out to check, but at the entrance to the washroom, he overheard Serena speaking. "I'm drunk, not dead. Why did you deliberately spin the bottle towards me? And deliberately make me do that to embarrass me in front of everyone? Serena, it's well known that you've liked Liam for so many years, but you can't bring yourself to say it. I did this to try to help you. Fulfill your wish. Your boyfriend is still in the dark. It's not fair to him. As long as we expose it, he'll surely know to back off." Faced with her friend's good intentions, Serena's tone was slightly impatient. "I don't need you to worry about my business. Don't make decisions for me again in the future." Hearing their conversation, Ethan couldn't help but laugh, but the corners of his eyes became wet and red. He took a deep breath, turned, went into the men's bathroom, splashed some cold water on his face, wiped himself dry, and sent a message to Serena. "Let's go. I'm waiting for you outside." Afterwards, Serena picked up her bag, put it over her shoulder, and slowly walked downstairs. As she reached the door, Ethan's mom's phone call came again. She talked nonstop for a long time, finally asking if he was ready. Ethan's voice was extremely indifferent. "I'm ready on my end. I can leave any time." As soon as he finished speaking, Serena's voice came from behind him. "Leave? Where are you going?" Chapter 5. Turning around and seeing Serena's cold face, Ethan subconsciously lowered his eyes. "It's nothing. I'm just going to participate in a competition in a few days." After randomly coming up with an excuse, Ethan paused. He was actually lying. But seeing Serena's indifferent expression, he didn't dwell on it. In this 3-year chase, he just wanted to exit gracefully, not to become a pitiful loser who had been dumped. Although he had decided to leave because of Liam's return, he didn't want her to know. So he planned to leave without a sound. She didn't like him anyway. It wouldn't matter whether he said goodbye or not. She wouldn't care, would she? Serena didn't know what he was thinking. She reached out to stop a taxi. As they were about to get into the cab, Liam chased after them from upstairs. Serena, you forgot your phone. Ethan, let's exchange contact information. After handing her the phone, Liam looked up at Ethan with a smile. Ethan glanced at Serena. Seeing that she didn't try to stop him, he hesitated before pulling up his QR code. After Liam scanned the code, he looked at him with a surprised expression. He opened his mouth as if he was going to ask something, but the words turned into a "see you." After they got into the cab, a cool evening breeze blew, slightly dispersing the alcohol in Serena's system. She had finally, belatedly, explained herself, but her tone was still indifferent. Ethan, Liam and I grew up together. I set the pinned contact in high school, and I forgot to change it all these years. Ethan didn't respond to her. After a long silence, Serena finally reacted and turned her head to look at him. She only saw tears streaming down his face. After 3 years of dating, it was the first time she had seen him cry, making her feel flustered. What's wrong? Nothing. Some sand got into my eye because it was windy. After saying that, Ethan reached out to wipe away the tears, forcing a smile. Then, he turned to look out at the passing scenery. His mind was replaying Liam's surprised expression from earlier. He had been looking at his girlfriend's childhood friend's moments. The moment he had been discovered, he had completely lost. That was why he was crying. Because in this love triangle, he was always the one in the shadows, the one who was always begging for mercy. If he hadn't been so stubborn about pursuing Serena, if he hadn't fallen in love with her and stayed in the country for her, would he have been able to maintain his dignity? But there were no ifs in this world. It was the path that he had chosen, so there was no one else to blame. Fortunately, everything was about to end, and he would be able to free himself soon. Once they got home, the first thing Ethan did was tear off a page from the calendar on the dining table. Looking at the large, eye-catching 21, Serena felt a little disturbed. She couldn't help but look towards Ethan. He lowered his head and went silently into the bedroom, not noticing her gaze. After showering, Serena grabbed Ethan, who was brushing his hair, and leaned forward to kiss him. She had always disliked such intimate gestures. Over the years, it was always Ethan who had initiated kisses, and they would only share brief pecks. It was the first time that Ethan had seen her so proactive. He was stunned. He lifted his hand to push her away. You had too much to drink today. Get some rest. Seeing that he was turning away to leave, Serena felt increasingly flustered. She felt like something was escaping her control, and she subconsciously hugged him. This time Ethan didn't push her away. Her heart, which had been pounding rapidly, gradually calmed down. Chapter 6. When he woke up again and saw Serena sitting on the sofa, Ethan was slightly surprised. Seeing him wake, she hurriedly put down her book and stood up. Didn't we say before that we would watch the sunset together? The weather hasn't been good these last few days, so let's go to Universal Studios first. When it gets sunny, I'll take you to Chiwe Mountain. Faced with her well-organized invitation, Ethan looked at her with a calm expression for a long time, before finally nodding slightly. For 3 years of dating, it had always been him who had bothered her for all sorts of dates. She had never said that she wanted to go out with him on her own. So he couldn't help but be surprised when he heard her say those words today. Had she discovered something unusual? Ethan had already decided to let go of her, so going out with her no longer held the same joy that it once did. The two of them hung out until the afternoon, looked around everywhere, and experienced a few of the attractions. Seeing that his expression was still indifferent, Serena couldn't help but ask him, "Are you not having fun?" Ethan smiled lightly and shook his head. "No, I am. I'm having fun." A photographer who was nearby saw the handsome man and beautiful woman and hurried over. "Would you like a photo service?" Serena was stunned. She suddenly remembered that they hadn't taken a single photo together for the 3 years that they had been dating. She was about to speak, but her phone rang. Seeing the number, she raised her hand to signal, and answered the call first. She didn't know what was said on the other end. Her expression changed slightly. Ethan, who was next to her, quietly watched her. Seeing her turn around abruptly, he turned around as well. Liam, wearing a panda headband, suddenly entered their line of sight. The moment she saw him, Serena walked over, a look of happiness on her face as she asked him why he was there. As soon as Liam appeared, she had forgotten about everything else. Ethan lowered his eyes, subtly declined the photographer, and then slowly walked over. It seemed that their only photo together before he left wasn't going to happen. Liam's smile was bright. I came to hang out with my senior today, but she had something to do, so she left first. I was bored when I saw someone who looked familiar from behind, and it turned out to be you. What a coincidence, Serena. Hearing this, the happiness on Serena's face immediately turned cold. Senior? What senior? What's her name? Do I know her? What's your relationship with her? Why are you meeting her as soon as you come back to the country? Looking at her urgent need to get to the bottom of this, Ethan stopped in his tracks, his fingers clenched subconsciously. You know her. It's Senior Su Jing from senior year in high school. She wanted to study abroad 2 years ago, and I helped her contact a tutor. She just wanted to thank me. Although Liam had explained the reason, Serena's expression was still not good. If you want to go somewhere, just ask me. Don't hang out with these suspicious people, so that I don't have to worry about your safety. After knowing each other for so long, it was the first time that Ethan had seen her express such a strong sense of possessiveness, and a hint of self-deprecation flashed in his eyes. In 3 years together, when had she ever said anything like that to him? Even if he spent the night with another woman, she probably wouldn't notice. Next, Serena, not wanting to leave Liam alone, suggested that the three of them hang out together. Liam agreed without thinking. Ethan nodded silently and followed them to the couple's haunted house. The maze-like room was pitch black, and there were terrifying monsters appearing from time to time. Liam had been screaming since he walked in. He was walking timidly along the wall, with Serena always next to him, carefully protecting him. Watching the two of them get closer, Ethan didn't say a word, and pushed open a mission door to the side. This haunted house was designed specifically for couples, so the first thing they saw after pushing open the door was a task sheet that read, "A man and a woman must kiss to get the key." Seeing this sentence, Liam became worried. He looked around, but everyone was a couple. He was alone, and scary ghosts were appearing from all sides. He was scared and just wanted to get out quickly, so he grabbed a solo woman who had just come in. Could you help me complete?" He had only finished half of his sentence when Serena grabbed his hand, pulled him into her arms, and gave him a quick peck on the lips. Liam's lips were still wet. He stared at her with wide eyes, but Serena didn't look up. She simply handed him the key that had popped out and said softly, "You're scared. You can go out first." After saying that, she turned her head and saw Ethan. It was only then that she remembered that he was with them. Her expression changed slightly. It was as if she was wondering how to explain this outrageous situation of kissing another boy in front of him. "Liam is timid. I was afraid that he..." As soon as she started, Liam ran out screaming. Seeing the large crowd of ghosts behind him, Serena was afraid of scaring him, so she pulled him by the arm and ran towards the exit. The narrow passage instantly became chaotic. As Ethan was being held back by the crowd, he watched the two of their backs getting further away. It was always him who got abandoned, wasn't it? Chapter 7. Although he had escaped from the haunted house, Liam was still shaken and kept patting his chest, unable to stop replaying the terrifying scenes in his mind. Thinking of the kiss from before, his face flushed instantly, and he glared shyly at Serena. "Serena, you were too impulsive just now. Even if you were worried about me, you shouldn't have done that in front of your boyfriend. He must be thinking all sorts of things." In her rush, Serena didn't know how Ethan had reacted. Feeling a little uncertain, she didn't answer him. Looking at the tightly closed door, Liam continued to mutter. That task was so strict. How did Ethan complete it alone? Did he just grab someone and kiss them too? Serena shook her head. He wouldn't. Seeing that she was so sure, Liam glanced at her, somewhat surprised. "Are you so sure?" "Yes. He likes me a lot, and he can't tolerate anyone else in his eyes." Ethan, who had just arrived at the door, heard this and a bitter smile appeared on his lips. So she knew everything. She knew that he liked her to an incurable point. Was that why she was hurting him so recklessly? He smoothed his hair, which was damp with cold sweat, and pushed open the door and walked out. Seeing him come out, Liam immediately went up and grabbed his hand affectionately, asking with concern, "Ethan, how did you get out?" Ethan took a few steps to the side, creating some distance between them. His tone was indifferent. "It's simple, you just have to give up the game, and they let you out." Hearing how casually he spoke, Liam looked at Serena with wide eyes. "You can just give up? Then what we did just now?" Before he could finish, Serena interrupted him directly. "I was too worried about you, I'm sorry." The flush on Liam's face still hadn't faded as he glanced at Ethan, his tone a little tentative. "I'm fine as long as you don't mind, Ethan. Serena and I used to play house and kiss all the time when we were little. It was just playing around. It didn't mean anything." Watching the two of them act in perfect harmony, Ethan couldn't say a word, and silently headed for the exit. After that fright, both of them were exhausted. Liam took the initiative to say goodbye and went home alone. Watching his car disappear from sight, Serena turned her gaze towards Ethan. "We're both tired today, let's go eat. Is Western food okay?" Seeing how proactive he was today, Ethan guessed that she was feeling guilty about the kiss and was trying to make it up to him. At this point, he didn't really care about those small matters anymore, so he pretended nothing had happened and agreed. The two went to a nearby French restaurant, and Serena had specifically booked a private room on the second floor. Looking at the panoramic view of the beautiful night scenery by the window and the romantic candlelit dinner in front of him, he still didn't show much emotion, staring blankly at the yellow roses in the vase. Serena was gathering her thoughts to start a conversation when a WeChat message popped up. After seeing the contents, she almost immediately stood up. "I suddenly have to go. Ethan, is it okay if you eat alone?" Ethan glanced at her, didn't ask what had happened, and nodded slightly. Serena grabbed her coat and rushed down the stairs. The waiter brought over the full meal that had just been ordered. Watching the waiter look around in surprise, Ethan didn't say anything, picked up his knife and fork, and started enjoying his dinner. After finishing his meal, it was just after 7. After calling a car using his phone, he mindlessly opened his Moments. He lightly swiped up and the page refreshed. Liam's latest post jumped into his eyes. The photo was of Liam in the hospital, with layers of gauze wrapped around his calf. A hint of blood was vaguely visible. So unlucky. How can a person get into a car pileup while on vacation? Back in the hospital as soon as I come home. Chapter 8. When he got home, Ethan received a message from Serena's junior classmate. "Senior, why is Senior Serena taking 4 or 5 days off? She's not replying to my messages. Did something happen?" Without needing to guess, Ethan knew why she was taking the leave. But he still came up with a reason to explain it for her. After all, Serena usually spent all her time in the lab, never late or absent. If she took so many days off, it was easy for people to overthink. Something happened at home. After explaining, he walked to the dining table and reached out to tear off another page of the calendar. It became 20. After tomorrow it would be a 1. Thinking of his upcoming journey, he took a deep breath, dragged his tired body into the bathroom. Perhaps because he had been running around all day, he slept extra soundly that night and didn't wake up until noon the next day. The apartment was quiet. Nothing had been moved and everything was still in place. Serena was not back again. Ethan had become accustomed to it. He walked to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of milk, and started another day of solitude. Day after day, the calendar on the table went from 20 to 15. There was no news from Serena, as if she had evaporated from his world. Ethan was busy packing his luggage and preparing the necessary documents. He would only think of his girlfriend occasionally when he was free. And Serena most likely was busy taking care of Liam, never once thinking of him, her boyfriend. On Monday, the junior classmate messaged him again, asking why Serena hadn't come to school. Ethan finally called her, asking where she was. Serena was silent for half a minute on the phone, before giving that same formulaic answer. "I'm a bit busy with something these days, so I can't go back for the time being." Seeing that she was still being so vague, Ethan couldn't help but ask what was on his mind. Did something happen to Liam? Seeing that she couldn't hide it any longer, Serena had no choice but to tell him the truth. Liam got into a car accident a few days ago on the way home. Thinking of that post, Ethan casually asked, "Was it serious?" "A minor injury. He didn't break any bones. But Liam is afraid of needles and dislikes taking medicine. He hasn't been eating or sleeping well since he was admitted. He needs someone by his side. That day it was because I didn't see him home that he got into an accident. I feel guilty, so I've been staying in the hospital with him. Don't be mad at me." Listening to her worried tone over a minor injury, Ethan wanted to say it was nothing, but the words just wouldn't leave his mouth. Not hearing any response, Serena thought that he was jealous and quickly apologized. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I've made you worry about me these past few days. I'll come back and spend time with you once Liam recovers." Ethan didn't take the promise to heart. He reminded her to take a leave of absence before hanging up the phone. After that, time passed like flowing water. The countdown went from 15 to 10, and then became a single digit. On the third to last day of the countdown, Ethan went back to school with his prepared study abroad application materials. He had one last meal with his classmates. Upon suddenly hearing that he was going abroad, everyone felt reluctant to part ways, and they went up to toast him goodbye. "Ethan, it will be many years before we see you again, and since your parents' work is abroad, you might not even come back later. This is so sudden. Although life is full of goodbyes, we'll all be thinking about you. We hope everything goes smoothly for you, and no matter what, you have to keep in touch with us." Faced with everyone's blessings and reminders, Ethan felt very touched. He lifted his cup to toast them, expressing his appreciation. A few of his roommates looked around. Not seeing Serena, they asked curiously, "You're about to leave. Why isn't Serena here with you to handle the procedures? You didn't tell her yet, did you?" Ethan lowered his head and smiled slightly, without directly answering. "She's very busy these days and can't get away." Everyone knew that the campus belle was a busy person. They didn't think too much about it and turned to comforting Ethan. "Actually, long-distance relationships aren't that bad. As long as you remember each other and love each other, it'll be fine." Ethan returned a smile. Then he lifted his glass, blocking the complex emotions in his eyes, but he couldn't hide the surge of wistfulness in his heart. Love could indeed cross mountains and rivers and maintain a relationship. Unfortunately, Serena didn't love him. Chapter 9. The gathering didn't end until 3 or 4 in the morning. When Ethan returned to his apartment, he saw that the clock on the wall was already pointing at 1. He reached out and tore off another page of the calendar. The countdown was at 2 days left. Ethan woke up early. He cleaned the apartment from top to bottom, and then he dragged all of the extra items that he had sorted out over the past few days downstairs and threw them out. Afterwards, he took all the diaries he had written during the past few years, and the photos he had secretly taken to the study and threw them into the shredder one page at a time, and mixed them into the food waste. From now on, the apartment where he and Serena had lived for 3 years would no longer have any trace of Ethan Joe. On the last day of the countdown, Ethan had a rare good night's sleep. It was an especially long sleep. When he opened the curtains, the sun was shining brightly. It was a good day to leave. He got up, went to the kitchen, and put the last bit of food that he had bought into the microwave. He tore off the last page of the calendar. As the microwave dinged, he heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. Serena, who hadn't been back for over half a month, noticed that something was off as soon as she entered. Many places in the room were empty. The calendar on the table had been ripped clean, making her feel very displeased. So she asked, "Why are so many things missing?" Ethan's voice was extremely calm. "I threw away the things I don't need. You can buy things you like again later." Serena nodded, not paying much attention to it. She took the vegetables she had just bought into the kitchen. Passing the dining table and seeing that he was eating such a simple meal, she couldn't help but take his plate. "It's your birthday today. Why are you eating these? Don't eat it. I'll cook." Ethan was somewhat surprised. She actually remembered. He sat on the sofa, listening to the sounds from the kitchen, while watching the clock on the wall tick on. When the dishes were on the table, the phone on the table rang. She put down her chopsticks and answered the call. "Serena? Where did you go? Liam doesn't want to take his medicine again. Please come to the hospital to persuade him." It was a middle-aged woman's voice. It was very similar to Liam's, and Ethan guessed that it was probably his mother. Serena didn't agree immediately, but lowered her head to look at Ethan's expression, seeming to ask for his opinion. Go ahead. I'll be fine. Hearing him say that indifferently, Serena let out a sigh of relief. She still felt that she was at fault, so she quickly said that she would celebrate his birthday with him in a few days. Ethan shook his head slightly and smiled as he declined. Looking at his expression, Serena felt inexplicably flustered. She was about to ask him, but the doorbell suddenly rang. She hurried to open the door and take the mango cake that she had ordered recently. When she came back, Ethan's expression had returned to normal. He walked in front of her, took the cake, and seemed to not want to hold her up. Serena's guilt increased a little. She looked at the time, and there were still a few minutes left, so she went to the dining table and opened the cake box. Let me leave after you make your wish. Ethan picked up the candle and lit it, clasped his hands together, and said his wish from the bottom of his heart. I hope Serena can get what she wants, and be with the person she loves forever. Hearing him say that, a smile appeared in Serena's cold eyes. She couldn't help but rub his hair. What kind of wish is that? Aren't we already together? Looking at the smile on her face, Ethan smiled as well, without explaining anything. He only reminded her that time was running out. Serena glanced at her watch, and then waved goodbye to him before turning around and walking to the door. As she was about to close the door, Ethan subconsciously stopped her. Serena, actually. Serena turned around and looked at him. What did you say? Looking at her face, the rest of the words got stuck in Ethan's throat. It's nothing. Go on, be careful on your way. Serena didn't think too much about it, nodded, turned around, and closed the door. Hearing her footsteps gradually fade away, the words that had lingered on his tongue echoed in the empty room. Serena, actually, I'm allergic to mangoes. Actually, today is the last day I'll be with you. The words were soft and weightless, like steam silently dissipating. When the clock on the wall pointed at 12, Ethan stood up, threw away the food and the cake on the table. Then he returned to the bedroom, took out his suitcase that he had prepared beforehand, and used a marker to write a sentence on the calendar with the number 0. Serena, let's break up. He signed his name, his mind set. The tightly closed door opened and closed again. Ethan left the apartment that he had once considered his home, his suitcase in tow, without looking back. Chapter 10. After leaving the hospital, Serena saw that it was still early, so she decided to go home and take Ethan out for dinner, to make up for the neglect she had shown him recently. The room, which was usually lit, was dark today. She glanced at her watch. It was 9:30 p.m. Had he gone to sleep so early? Or had he gone out and not returned? Serena wasn't too sure, but the house was very quiet, as if no one was there. She had been running around all day and her body was covered in sweat, so she went straight to the bathroom. Half an hour later she came out, drying her wet hair. She still didn't see Ethan, and her brow furrowed. In her memory, Ethan had never returned home late before. Why hadn't he come back yet today? She walked towards his bedroom, pushed open the ajar door gently, and froze. The wall, which used to be full of pictures and paintings, was now blank. The bed with its mattress protector and bedding was completely empty. Serena couldn't believe what she was seeing. She reached out and rubbed her eyes several times, but the room was still empty. She abruptly dropped her towel and rushed into the room, looked around, then opened the drawers and the wardrobe but couldn't find anything. Had Ethan taken his things and moved out? The moment this thought came to her, Serena panicked. She hurriedly ran out of the bedroom and checked all the other rooms. A large part of the bookshelf in the study was empty. Only her belongings were left in the bathroom. The blankets and toys were gone from the living room. All the mugs he had bought were gone from the kitchen. Every time she saw something was missing, Serena's heart fell a little more into the darkness. When she realized that there was no trace of Ethan left in the apartment, she felt like she had been hit in the head with a club. Her mind was buzzing. Her face was full of disbelief. Her breathing became rapid. She grabbed the edge of the table with all her might, the veins on the back of her hand popping out. Her panicked eyes were blankly searching, finally settling on the calendar with the number 0 in front of her. Even more jarring than the 0 was the line written in black marker. Her eyesight was excellent. She immediately saw the sentence on it. "Let's break up." Her trembling hands grabbed the calendar and pulled it up to her face. The 2 words "break up" hit her eyes like 2 heavy stones, instantly making the whites of her eyes turn red. Ethan wanted to break up with her? The moment this thought entered her mind, Serena completely lost control. She grabbed her phone, found Ethan's number, and called him. After a long ringing tone, she heard a message saying that the phone was turned off. The call that she couldn't get through was like a bucket of cold water thrown on Serena's head. She frantically grabbed her coat and put it on. She slipped on her slippers, rushed out the door, stopped a car, and headed towards the school. Before curfew, she arrived at the men's dormitory. She stopped a male student and asked him to go to room 508 to tell Ethan Joe to come down. 10 minutes later, the tightly closed door opened, and Serena's heart trembled. The person who walked out, however, greatly disappointed her. It wasn't Ethan. It was his roommate Zhang Hao. Seeing the normally aloof campus belle looking disheveled and panicked, Zhang Hao was also very surprised. "Serena? Why are you here? Where's Ethan Joe? Tell him to come down." The 2 sentences were spoken at the same time. After hearing what she had said, Zhang Hao was even more surprised. "Ethan isn't in the dorm. I remember that his flight was today. Didn't you know?" Hearing the word flight, Serena didn't even think and turned around, running towards the school gate. On her way to the airport, she called Ethan again. The moment the call connected, her heart, which had been plummeting into the darkness, finally settled. What followed was a surge of rage. Chapter 11. After a long journey of over 10 hours, Ethan landed in Paris. His parents were waiting at the boarding gate. As soon as they saw his figure, they waved enthusiastically. "Ethan, over here." Seeing his parents again after half a year, his low mood instantly improved. He jogged over and hugged them. "Dad, Mom, how long have you been waiting?" His dad took his luggage and his mom hugged her son, kissing him, her tone revealing joy. "A little over an hour. It wasn't long and we're not tired. You've been on a flight for so long, you must have suffered a lot, right?" No matter how old he was, as long as he was in his mother's arms, Ethan felt like he was still a child. He couldn't help but want to act spoiled. Yeah, I'm so tired. Mom, you have to cook more delicious food to make up for my broken heart." His mom patted his shoulder, her eyes full of affection. "You little glutton. Order anything you want, and your mom will make it for you." The family of 3 went home laughing. As soon as he put down his luggage, his dad went into the kitchen to prepare the ingredients. His mom dragged her son into the bedroom. Looking at the room filled with sunlight and the prepared furniture and bedding, Ethan dropped his suitcase and jumped on the bed. "The bed is so soft. Mom, you still know me the best. You can rest for a bit. I'll call you when the food is ready." Ethan nodded repeatedly. After watching his mom leave the room, he reached out and stretched. Smelling the sunlight on the blanket, his tense nerves gradually relaxed, and his heavy eyelids closed. After preparing the food, Ethan's dad went in to see that he was asleep. He pulled the curtains a little to block the bright sunlight. As he was about to leave, the phone that Ethan had placed on the cabinet suddenly vibrated. His dad was afraid of waking the child, so he quickly grabbed the phone and left, closing the door behind him. He went into the kitchen and saw that the phone was still ringing non-stop. He finally lowered his head to look at the screen. When he saw the 3 words "Serena song," his expression immediately turned serious. He raised his arm to nudge his wife, signaling her to look. His mom glanced at it and immediately put down the spatula in her hand, and an indescribable expression appeared on her face. The couple looked at each other for a while, before his dad finally pressed the answer button. Serena's angry voice came from the phone. "Ethan Joe, what do you mean by this?" Hearing the tone, the 2 looked at each other and didn't say anything. Not getting a reply, Serena became even more angry. "Where did you go? Send me your address. We'll talk face to face." There was another few seconds of silence in the kitchen, before his mom answered her. "I'm afraid you won't be able to talk face to face. Ethan came to France. You can contact him again when he wakes up." After speaking, his mom hung up the phone and went back to cooking. Seeing that she was still in the mood to cook, his dad instantly became anxious. Who is this woman? Why does she have such an attitude towards Ethan? Why aren't you worried at all? You're still cooking. His mom rolled her eyes at him and raised her hand to shush him a few times. The kids are already here with us, so what's there to worry about? Why are you making such a ruckus? Don't wake the kid up. Even the biggest problems have to wait until the kid eats. Ethan's dad thought about it carefully and felt that his wife had a point, so he put the phone in his pocket and helped to clean up the food waste. 40 minutes later, 6 dishes were on the table. His mom went in to wake her son. Ethan opened his eyes and his hand instinctively reached for the bedside table, but it touched nothing. He looked at his mom, still groggy, his voice filled with sleepiness. "Mom, where's my phone?" Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He turned around and glared at his dad. His dad touched his nose and walked in with a flattering smile as he handed him the phone. It's here, it's here." Ethan hadn't yet reacted. He took the phone and was about to check the time, when his parents both stuck their heads over to look at it. "Ethan, who is Serena-san?" Chapter 12. Hearing his parents ask this question, Ethan was stunned for at least 10 seconds. His hand scratched at his hair unnaturally, and he stammered, unable to speak. When he was a freshman, his parents had immigrated abroad. They had wanted to take him with them, but he had fallen for Serena-san and wouldn't leave. He was determined to stay in the country to complete his university degree. Although his parents didn't object to him dating in college, he knew that it was him pursuing her, so he hadn't dared to tell his parents the reason. Later, although he had gotten together with Serena, he knew that his parents were very gossipy. He didn't want to be constantly questioned, so he had chosen to keep his mouth shut. He had kept it a secret for 3 years. His parents kept saying they wanted him to go abroad. He always made excuses, and even when he was about to graduate, he wouldn't relent. His parents became anxious and started to suspect that he was in a relationship. He had been wondering whether he should tell the truth when he found the photos of Liam in Serena's computer. These past few months were the most uncomfortable time of his otherwise smooth and easy 21 years. His parents were a college couple. They had gone from school uniforms to a wedding dress, and had been loving for 27 years. In contrast to his parents' relationship, the 3-year relationship he had had with Serena turned out to be just his own wishful thinking. It was too pathetic, so he had decided to keep it completely secret. But he didn't expect that he would be found out on his first day in Paris. His mom watched her silent son, and raised her hand to elbow his dad again. She smiled as she touched Ethan's hair. "Don't mind your dad. Get up and let's eat." At the dining table, the family of 3 had their heads down, silently eating their food. Looking at his parents who were trying so hard to hide their embarrassment, Ethan had 700 or 800 thoughts running through his head. Finally, he opened his mouth. "Mom and Dad, Serena-san was my ex-girlfriend. We were together for 2 years, and we broke up recently." Ethan gave a half-truth. The couple had already expected it. They exchanged another glance. His dad then picked up the conversation. "I didn't like this girl's tone of voice. If you ask me, she's not worthy of our precious son at all. It's good that you broke up." Looking at his parents' faces, which revealed both comfort and worry, Ethan quickly laughed. "Dad's right. We're going to graduate and go our separate ways anyway. It's good that we broke up, so that I won't be delayed in my studies." Hearing him say this, his mom patted his shoulder and gave him a thumbs up. "That's my son. You're ambitious. You've got the guts." The meal eventually returned to laughter and cheerful conversations. After eating, Ethan returned to his bedroom. He looked at the name in his call log and was stunned. So it was Serena who had called him. No wonder his parents knew about it. Since his dad said that she had a bad attitude, she must have been angry after seeing the note he had left behind. After all, she was the campus belle of Hua University. She was always the one who rejected others. It must be difficult for her not to be angry when someone broke up with her. But she would probably be angry for a day or 2 at most. After all, she didn't care about him. When she calmed down and realized that breaking up was a good result, she would have gotten rid of him. and she would be able to follow her heart and pursue Liam. A happy ending for all, how wonderful. And they would probably never see each other again in this life. Thinking about this, Ethan sighed softly, his finger hovering over Serena's number for a moment. Then he simply and decisively pressed the delete button. Chapter 13. With his mom's help, Ethan only spent an hour settling into his new place. He was exhausted. After washing up, he fell asleep. When he woke up again, the sky outside the window was dark. He picked up his phone and checked the time. It was 6 a.m. He had actually slept for more than 10 hours. Unbelievable. He sat up in bed, pulled the blanket around him, turned on the lights, and was still a little stunned looking at the unfamiliar room. It took him a few minutes to realize that he was in Paris. Thinking of his parents sleeping next door, his feeling of unease gradually dissipated. His phone suddenly vibrating startled him. He unlocked it and swiped open. When he saw a familiar number, his groggy eyes focused. Although he had deleted the name, Ethan knew this number by heart. Why was Serena calling him again? Did she refuse to swallow this bitterness and insist on scolding him? Ethan blinked and tried to shake off the last vestiges of sleepiness. Then he resigned himself to his fate and pressed the answer button, taking the lead and explaining. Serena, I've thought about it a lot these past few days. I don't think we're suitable to be a couple, so I brought up breaking up. Anyway, it's not like you like me. Let's just have a good breakup and go our separate ways. There's no need to contact each other anymore. He finished in one breath. But there was no reply on the phone, only heavier and heavier breathing. 2 minutes later, Serena finally asked him a question in a tired, hoarse voice. You proposed breaking up for no reason, and you just want to dismiss me by saying we're not suitable? Do you think that's polite? Wasn't it polite? Ethan thought about it carefully and didn't feel like he had done anything wrong. But, maintaining his stance of resolving the problem, he very politely responded to her. Then what do you want? Let's meet and talk face to face. Hearing her proposal, Ethan paused, rejecting her. I'm not in the capital. I can't meet. Before he could finish, Serena interrupted him. I know. I just landed in Paris. Send me your address. I'll go find you now. Ethan was stunned by her words. His tone was extremely slow, filled with deep doubt. Why are you in Paris? That's not for you to worry about. You just need to go out to a cafe, then send me the address, and wait for me to come find you to talk about breaking up face to face. After speaking, she didn't forget to add, I won't leave Paris until I know why you want to break up. The next second, the call ended. Then Serena's chat box popped up on WeChat. It was the address of the Beauvais-Tilly airport, and a concise message. Send me the address. Ethan never thought that she would follow him to Paris to demand an explanation for their breakup. But he didn't want to go down this road. A breakup was a breakup. He believed that his conscience was clear. There was no need to talk about it anymore. So he directly put his phone on silent, threw it to the side, and pulled the blanket over his head and went back to sleep. He slept for another 2 hours. His mom called him to get up when she finished making breakfast. After eating, the family of 3 went to the supermarket, bought all their daily necessities, then went for a walk in the nearby park, before returning home around lunchtime. When he opened his phone again, seeing almost 100 calls and over 300 WeChat messages, Ethan was silent. The next second, a new message popped up. You were the one who pursued me so hard, why don't you want me now? Ethan Joe, are you really so heartless? Chapter 14. After knowing that Ethan was already in France, Serena didn't think and immediately booked the most recent flight to Paris. During the dozen or so hours on the plane, her mind was a mess. She kept thinking about the events that had occurred during the past few years. In her heart, Liam was always the one and only. So, even when he went abroad, she didn't let go of him. She had always regretted the love she hadn't been able to express. She couldn't let go of him, but she couldn't confess either. So all she could do was endure the torment of longing day after day. The people around her advised her to think things through and try having a relationship. Maybe that would help her move on? After her friend's repeated persuasion, Serena was swayed a little. She decided to try it out. So when Ethan confessed for the 23rd time, she agreed to be his girlfriend. And the reason she had chosen him was simply because he was too enthusiastic, too persistent, and liked her too much. From him, she saw the shadow of herself when she pursued Liam. So, this relationship was nothing more than self-pity at the beginning. Serena didn't like Ethan. He knew it and she knew it. But both of them tacitly avoided this issue, and continued to be a couple for 3 years. For the first 2 years, although they would sometimes go on dates like ordinary couples, Serena had never really paid him any attention. It wasn't until the start of her senior year when, for the sake of convenience, the two of them discussed moving in together that their relationship had substantive progress. Living together every day, she was also attracted to Ethan. She began trying to accept his love and accept the relationship. But when Liam returned to the country, her heart, which was about to settle down, began to waver again. On one side was a childhood friend of over a decade, and on the other a boyfriend of 3 years. She really wanted to force herself to make a decision, but she just couldn't make up her mind. Her long-established habit of partiality made her unable to ignore Liam's existence. And Ethan, who wholeheartedly gave without asking for anything in return, had become the safety net she chose for herself. On the countless occasions she ran toward Liam, Serena had self-righteously believed that she was hiding her feelings well, so she became increasingly unscrupulous. It wasn't until he left that breakup note that she realized for the first time that the situation was escaping her control. For the first time she realized that, for her, Ethan was irreplaceable. So she didn't care about anything else. She threw everything aside and followed him, simply to try to hold on to him. But he used an attitude of rejection to tell her clearly that there was no possibility for them. Serena couldn't accept this ending. She frantically tried to contact him, asking around everywhere for his news, but to no avail. Looking at the blank chat box in front of her, a deep sense of powerlessness gradually welled up in her heart. She couldn't understand why he had suddenly proposed breaking up and leaving her. She was stubbornly demanding a reason for why she was not being loved anymore. After a long, unbearable wait, Ethan finally replied to her, sending her an address. She didn't stop for a moment and flew over there. Then, in front of a cafe, Serena saw Ethan. The moment she saw his figure, she rushed forward to hug him, but he took a step back to push her away. He raised his cold face and told her expressionlessly, "We've already broken up. It's best that we keep our distance." Chapter 15. The two of them took a seat in a corner. Ethan's gaze was on the tablecloth, waiting for her to speak. Serena's eyes, however, were fixed on him, taking in all his movements, afraid that he would disappear again. After the waiter brought over the coffee, Ethan took a sip before raising his head to look at her. His tone was calm. "What do you want to talk about? Speak." Serena's hands, under the table, clenched involuntarily. She did her best to control her emotions. "Why did you want to break up? Did I do something wrong?" Hearing her ask those two questions, a hint of helplessness flashed in Ethan's eyes. "Isn't it normal to break up when you don't like someone anymore?" Hearing his answer, Serena's heart ached. She instantly felt flustered. "You're lying." Ethan noticed her panic. First, he was a little surprised. But thinking about the confident tone she had had in front of the haunted house, he felt it was a bit funny. "I never lie. If I like someone, I like them, and if I don't like them, I don't like them. I am faithful to my own heart, unlike you." The first sentence made Serena feel even more panicked, while the second made her confused. "Unlike me." So until now she still hadn't understood her own heart? Looking at her bewildered expression, Ethan suddenly felt a little sorry for her. He met her gaze. His tone was completely honest. "Unlike you, you're always a coward. You never dare to face your true feelings. You clearly like Liam, but you don't dare confess. You used me as a tool to try and move on, while still drowning in the past, unwilling to let go." With each sentence that Ethan spoke, Serena's face paled a little. Every word stabbed at her most painful spots, making her lose the courage to look at him. Ethan didn't care what she was thinking. He just wanted to get all the words that were bottled up inside out in one go. "I know you don't like me. I've always known. I thought that as long as I kept trying I could move you. But after Liam came back, I realized that love cannot be won through effort. If you don't like someone, then you don't like them. It doesn't matter whether it's 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years. I'm tired. I don't have the strength to continue this hopeless relationship any longer. That's why I decided to break up. Perhaps because I've poured too much passion into this relationship for so long. It's made you think that I can't live without you, that you are essential to me. You can't accept the breakup simply because you can't accept being dumped by a fervent admirer. The only reason you followed me here is because you were acting on impulse. As soon as you calm down, you'll realize that breaking up is the best outcome for me, for you, and for Liam. Instead of wasting your time and energy on your ex-boyfriend, you should take a chance and confess to Liam. In the end, people have to look forward, don't they? After hearing this long, heartfelt speech, Serena was stunned. In this relationship, she had never cared about what Ethan thought, and she had never thought about the future. In her world, everything was natural. She was pushed forward by reality, without ever having proactively tried to fight for anything. Even with Liam, she had silently accepted the ending of them only being friends. But only with Ethan could Serena not accept the breakup. Even though he had now made everything clear, she still didn't want to break up. Was this unwillingness or love? She couldn't tell. Chapter 16. Serena was silent for a long time. Ethan didn't say anything either. After quietly finishing the coffee in his cup, he picked up his bag and stood up. Lost in her own world, Serena, seeing his actions, immediately stood up, reaching out to grab his hand. Ethan patiently waited for a minute, but she couldn't say anything. He was getting a little impatient. He raised his left hand and peeled her fingers off one by one. For the sake of the 4 years that I liked you, please let me go, Serena. His sighing tone made Serena's heart tremble. She looked at him, flustered, her face full of anxiety. I'm sorry, Ethan. It was my fault these past few years. I didn't fulfill my responsibility as your girlfriend. Can you please give me another chance? Ethan looked at her steadily, a hint of irony flashing in his eyes. I'm not the one you like. Even if we started over 100 times, there wouldn't be any result. Let's just end it here. After speaking, he strode towards the door, not turning back again. Watching his resolute back, Serena only felt her strength slowly being drained away. She slumped back into her chair, her eyes unfocused. His words echoed in her ears, and she couldn't help but recall the 3 years that they had dated. She rarely replied to his messages, rarely shared her daily life with him, and rarely went out with him on dates. She had never cared about his feelings, never noticed his changes, and had never expressed love to him in front of him. Ethan had persisted in a love without any response for 3 years. But Serena had been completely oblivious. Instead, she had kept a close connection with Liam in front of him, making all sorts of intimate gestures. After consuming and squandering his love so recklessly, what right did she have to try to win him back? The afternoon sun was bright and warm, making Ethan feel warm all over. After saying all the words that had been on his heart, he felt that his steps had become lighter. Everything seemed pleasant. The fountain in the square was refracting a rainbow under the sunlight. He took out his phone from his bag and wanted to take a picture to remember it, but he noticed that he suddenly had a lot of new messages on WeChat. He opened them one by one. They were all questions from his friends and classmates, asking him what had happened with Serena. As he looked at them, Ethan felt a headache. He didn't know how to reply. After all, this matter also involved Liam. He didn't want to drag him in, so he had to choose his words carefully. He walked as he thought, but in the end he felt that anything he said would be wrong. So he simply posted on his moments, using the rainbow he had just taken as the photo. Thank you for your concern. It was a peaceful breakup. Just over 10 simple words were like a tornado sweeping through all of Hua University's social media platforms. The campus bell is single again. Did Serena's song finally dump Ethan Zhou? Looking at the exaggerated screenshots of discussions his roommates had sent, Ethan felt amused on top of his speechlessness. He couldn't help but ask in the dorm group chat, "Am I really that bad? Why are people saying that Serena was liberated?" His roommates immediately sent him comforting messages. They're just blinded by the campus bell's fame. They don't understand how great you are, Ethan. That's right. That kind of woman who has some beauty is everywhere. Don't be sad. We'll find you an even prettier one. Zhang Hao's right. It's not worth it to be sad over a heartless woman. Ethan, get it together. So everyone thought that he was very sad? Ethan couldn't help but laugh. He immediately typed a message to prove his innocence. I'm not sad. It's because I was the one who dumped Serena. 5 seconds later, the screen was flooded with countless question marks and exclamation points. 10 minutes later, news that the campus belle had been dumped by her boyfriend spread. With that, Ethan became famous. Chapter 17. After seeing Ethan's official announcement of the breakup, Liam was the first to call Serena to confirm it. But she was like she had evaporated from the earth. There was no response. This had never happened before, so he couldn't help but feel a little panicked. He sent a few more messages. After 7 or 8 hours passed, and there was still no response, Liam couldn't wait any longer. So he tentatively sent Ethan a surprised emoji. Did you and Serena really break up? Why? 5 minutes later, a reply came back. I'm studying abroad in France. Long-distance relationships are too tiring. I didn't want to be in one anymore, so we broke up. Seeing these few words, a bright smile blossomed on Liam's lips. His eyes filled with joy. Now that they had broken up, Serena would now obediently stay by his side. He wouldn't need to find ways to separate them anymore. Although that's what he was thinking, the messages he sent were filled with regret. Actually, I really thought that you two would last until the end. It's such a pity that you broke up. But I can understand how you feel. After all, Serena's personality is really hard to deal with. Aside from us, the friends who have grown up with her, she doesn't get close to anyone. You must have been suffering these past few years. I hope your studies abroad go well. Faced with his sarcastic words, Ethan simply replied, Thank you. Liam didn't want to waste time on someone who had already been eliminated. He picked up his phone and went out to Serena's home to find her, only to find an empty house. Looking at the tightly closed door, his brow furrowed. Where did Serena go? He was anxious to see her, so he booked a private room in a nearby tea house and waited for her. He waited for over 10 hours. He had slept for a bit before seeing Serena's figure the next morning. He hurriedly went downstairs and followed her, before finally stopping her at her front door. Serena, where did you go? Why haven't you been replying to my messages and answering my calls? Faced with his accusatory, spoiled tone, Serena, exhausted, didn't have the strength to answer him. Some business. After saying those simple words, she turned around to go inside. Liam wasn't satisfied with her response. He pouted, his tone clearly angry. What business is so important? Are you just ignoring me? Serena paused. Her mind felt like it was about to explode. Her tone wasn't very gentle. I'm tired right now. Don't make trouble. For over a decade, Serena had never spoken to Liam in such a perfunctory and impatient tone. And he, who had been spoiled since he was a child, had been waiting for her all night. He was harboring grievances, so how could he swallow this? He instantly made an even bigger scene. I'm concerned about you, but you're saying that I'm making trouble? Serena, what happened to you? I've always been like this. After coldly throwing those words at him, Serena slammed the door shut. The loud bang startled Liam. Tears started falling. He bit his lip, glanced at the tightly closed door, a look of resentment on his face, before stomping his foot and running away. In 48 hours, Serena hadn't had a single complete night of sleep. She had flown back and forth between the capital and Paris 3 times, so as soon as she got home, she fell asleep the moment she touched the bed. She slept for a whole day and night. Finally, an intense feeling of hunger woke her up. She stood up groggily, grabbed the wall, and habitually walked towards Ethan's bedroom. She pushed open the door and called his name several times, but didn't get any response. When her blurry eyes returned to normal and she could clearly see the empty room, she instantly froze like a statue. A chill ran from the soles of her feet straight to her heart. She lowered her eyes, covering the sadness and disappointment, but she couldn't control her body from shaking. She forgot Ethan was gone. They had already broken up. Chapter 18. Following the news that Serena had been dumped, the news that she was out drinking late at night once again became a hot topic of conversation for everyone at Hua University. No one would have thought that this favored daughter of the heavens, this popular figure on campus, would actually be hurt by love. And when a few of his roommates sent Ethan this news, his first reaction was that it was just gossip and rumors. It was just a breakup. How could Serena possibly be sad for him? It wasn't until Zhang Hao sent over a few high-resolution photos he had secretly taken that Ethan fell silent as he looked at the person who was drunk and passed out with empty bottles. His roommates sent him questions. Ethan, didn't you say that your relationship wasn't that deep? Why is she so sad? Ethan didn't know either. He supported his head with his hand and thought for a long time. Finally, he boldly guessed that she must have just confessed to Liam, and then been rejected? Otherwise, he really couldn't figure out why she was so sad. Liam was also one of the people who received these widely spread photos. Several friends asked if he and Serena had argued. Was that why she was so dispirited? Seeing these photos, Liam, who had been sulking all day, finally calmed down. He remembered that Serena had seemed very tired yesterday. It was understandable that her tone was a little harsh. Besides, his attitude wasn't very good either. He had said some things to her when he had lost his temper. It was no wonder that she went out drinking. After all, he had known her for over a decade, and he knew her personality. She kept everything bottled up inside. So he decided to go find her and offer her a way out. By the time he got the address and rushed over, Serena was still drinking one cup after another. Several friends were trying to persuade her, but she wouldn't listen to anything, and just kept her head down, pouring herself more alcohol. Seeing him arrive, the people in the room were like they had seen a savior. They quickly invited him in. Liam, why did you take so long to get here? Quick, persuade Serena not to drink anymore. If she drinks anymore, she's going to end up in the hospital. Looking at everyone's anxious expressions, Liam put on a bashful expression. Oh, you should just drag her away. I wouldn't be able to persuade her. She doesn't listen to me. You're being modest now. Among all of us, who doesn't know that Serena listens to you the most? She'll listen to everything you say. After hearing everyone praise him, Liam felt a little full of himself. He walked towards Serena with a self-conscious gait and held her bottle. Stop drinking, Serena. Let's go home. Serena lifted her blurry eyes to look at him, and swatted his hand away. I don't want you to interfere. Liam's expression instantly froze. The people next to them exchanged glances after hearing that. They quickly stepped forward to smooth things over. Serena, it's Liam. Aren't you going home with him? Liam also thought that she hadn't recognized him, so he held her hand again to try and help her up. But Serena brutally knocked his hand away again, her voice filled with impatience. I know you're Liam. Don't touch me. I'm not going anywhere with you. Liam tightly clenched his fist. His expression became extremely unpleasant, and Serena's next sentence directly made the atmosphere in the room plummet to freezing point. Call Ethan. I want him to come get me. Hearing that name, several of her friends gasped. Ethan Zhou? Didn't they break up? Was she getting drunk today for Ethan, not for Liam? The moment that thought occurred to them, they didn't dare to look at Liam's face. After being publicly rebuffed by Serena for the third time, Liam's anger surged. Hearing the name Ethan Zhou from her mouth, his emotions were instantly ignited. You've already broken up with Ethan Zhou. Serena buried her head in the pile of bottles, her tone filled with infinite sadness. We broke up, but it was no use going to Paris to try to win him back. Ethan doesn't want me anymore. He doesn't want me anymore. Hearing her non-stop muttering, Liam's mind exploded. His face was filled with disbelief. Had she gone to find Ethan to reconcile with him during the time she had disappeared? Was her listlessness and negativity these past few days because she had broken up with him? Liam couldn't accept this news. He picked up a glass of wine and threw it in her face, his voice a little hysterical. Serena-san, what do you mean by this? You fell in love with Ethan Zhou. Chapter 19. The cold wine made Serena more awake. She lifted her head and looked around, her tone dull as she repeated Liam's words, taking 5 minutes to unravel the meaning of that sentence. Had she fallen in love with Ethan Zhou? This question spun around in her mind countless times. In the end, she got an affirmative answer. She had fallen in love with Ethan Zhou. Otherwise, why would her heart ache so much after hearing the news of the breakup? The long silence made everyone in the room feel a little lost. As they were trying to figure out how things had suddenly taken such a big turn, Serena suddenly opened her mouth. Each word was spoken with a firm tone. Yes, I've fallen in love with Ethan Joe. Liam lost control the moment he heard these words. He stepped forward and slapped her across the face. Are you crazy? What's so good about him that makes you so obsessed? That slap completely woke Serena up. She shook her head and tightly closed her eyes. We've been together for 3 years. He was good in every way. I was the one who did him wrong and I am sorry. But you've already broken up. Liam screamed these words out, and Serena's expression became increasingly depressed. We did break up, but I don't want to leave him. I'm going to Paris in 5 days to win him back. Everyone in the room opened their mouths wide, their eyes wide open. They couldn't believe that these words had come out of her mouth, and Liam's psychological defenses were completely destroyed by this. All those years ago, everyone said that Serena was madly in love with him, but in the 4 years that he was abroad, she never once came to find him. But Ethan had only left for less than a week, and she had already flown over to see him, and was still going to continue to pursue him even after being rejected. She could do this much for her ex-boyfriend. Then what was he? The room was extremely quiet. Even the sound of breathing was inaudible. At that moment, silence spoke louder than words. Liam only felt that he had lost all face. He glared at her with hatred and unwillingness before running out of the room. The few girls in the room looked at each other, before all turning to look at Serena. Serena, are you really going to study in France? Serena nodded and opened another bottle of wine and poured herself a drink. What if Ethan doesn't agree to reconcile? What will you do then? Serena's voice was filled with a strange kind of determination. I won't give up. As long as he's willing to forgive me, I can wait for as long as it takes. The girls were silent for a long time before speaking. What about Liam? You don't like him anymore. Serena had already sorted out her feelings. She hesitated for a moment, but still spoke her heart to her friends. I did like Liam a lot before, but after being with Ethan these past few years, I actually slowly let go of my feelings for him. Only see him as a younger brother. Just like he said, let's keep our relationship as friends. I want to step into a new future. Hearing her say this, everyone in the room sighed deeply. After all, the two of them had been ambiguous for so long. It was a pity that they wouldn't be together in the end. But since Serena had already made her choice, they naturally supported her unconditionally. They all stepped forward and patted her shoulder. With everyone's encouragement, her heart, which had fallen to the bottom, finally calmed down. After finishing the last drop of wine in her cup, she stood up and left. Step by step, she walked resolutely and decisively. Chapter 20. With several months left until the start of school, Ethan didn't have much to do, so he found an internship at an advertising agency. He majored in graphic design. Manhwa University's program was very influential internationally, so although it was just an internship, his colleagues and superiors took good care of him. The only problem was that the company was a bit far from home. The commute was too long. His parents were worried that he wouldn't get enough rest, so they rented a small studio near the company for him. They wanted him to return home on the weekends. Although Ethan was homesick, he had grown a lot after completing 4 years of university. He quickly adapted to his life in Paris. At 8 in the morning, he slung his briefcase over his shoulder, yawning as he went out to work. He suddenly caught sight of the fact that someone had moved into the room opposite him, which had been for rent for a long time. Driven by curiosity, he wanted to take a look at his neighbor, but the elevator just happened to open, so he gave up the thought. The moment the elevator doors closed, a somewhat familiar voice entered his ears. It was a fluent London accent. The tone sounded a lot like Serena's. It made Ethan freeze. But wasn't she in the country drowning her sorrows? She shouldn't have appeared here. He must have misheard it. Ethan shook his head, pushed aside this unrealistic thought, and mustered his spirits before going to work. There weren't many tasks assigned to him during his internship period, but he was a perfectionist. He immersed himself completely in his work and forgot about the time. In the end, his colleague at the next desk reminded him that it was already time to go home. Today was Friday. He planned to go back home to pick up a few things, then stay for dinner. When he got back to his apartment, he glanced at the tightly closed door opposite his before entering. He then picked up a bag that was by the entrance and left again. The elevator going up stopped at the 21st floor. He stepped to the side. The elevator doors opened and a woman walked out. He lowered his head, ready to enter the elevator. But the figure was blocking the elevator and refused to move. Ethan wanted to see who was so rude. When he lifted his head and saw Serena's face, his brow furrowed. "Good evening. What are you doing here?" Her casual greeting made Ethan realize that she most likely knew his address. And her answer didn't come as a surprise. "I live in 2104. Wasn't that the unit where someone had just moved in this morning?" Ethan's expression became even more serious. "Why are you in Paris? Why did you move in opposite me? Don't tell me that this is a coincidence." Seeing that he didn't look too happy, Serena's eyes, which had been anticipating a surprise, flashed with disappointment. "There's no wall that wind can't blow through, Ethan. If you have the will, you can find out anything." For some reason, hearing her say this made Ethan's hair stand on end. His expression turned cold. "I don't care if you have a will or not. I just want to tell you that we've already broken up. You can live wherever you want. Just don't disturb my life." Seeing that his expression had gotten worse, Serena also started to panic. She quickly explained, "I didn't mean anything else. I just wanted to be closer to you. I just want to see you every day. Don't worry, I definitely won't disturb you." Although she spoke sincerely, Ethan didn't want to waste his breath on her. He turned around and walked into the elevator that had come down from the floor above. Before coming to Paris, Serena had expected that his attitude towards her would be cold. But after meeting him, he was more than just cold. He also had a hint of rejection towards her. It completely washed away her joy upon seeing him again. Watching the elevator reach the first floor, she finally turned around and returned to her new home. The house was empty and bare. It looked very desolate. Serena put down the large pile of things she had just bought, sat down on the sofa, looked around the room, and a faint sense of sadness welled up in her heart. She couldn't help but think of the time when she lived with Ethan. When they had first moved into the apartment, other than a few pieces of furniture, it was completely empty. It was Ethan who took the initiative to buy a lot of furniture, daily necessities and ornaments. One by one, he filled up the room, turning the rental into a cozy home. Unfortunately, she hadn't known to cherish it back then. She had overlooked all the hard work that he had put in. It wasn't until everything was gone that she finally woke up. But Ethan's heart had already turned completely cold. Was there still a chance for her to win him back? She didn't know. She only knew that she would exhaust all her energy on this relationship, just like he had done before. This time it was Serena's turn to chase after Ethan. Chapter 21. Knowing that his son was coming back, Ethan's mom had prepared a table full of delicious dishes for him. But when the door opened, seeing the unhappy expression on his face, his parents were both surprised. They rushed over to greet him. "Ethan, what's wrong? Was work not going well? Or are you not happy with where you're living?" On the way back, Ethan had been bothered by the fact that Serena had moved in. Seeing that his parents had started worrying, he quickly put on a smile. "It's nothing. It's just that someone stepped on my foot when I was coming out of the elevator." Being his own parents, they could tell that he wasn't telling the truth just by looking at his perfunctory smile. But they had always believed in giving their son space, so they didn't press him. Instead, they urged him to wash his hands and eat. But in front of the lavish dishes, Ethan was still a bit distracted. He was still holding the empty bone of his ribs in his mouth. Seeing that his expression was off, Ethan's dad quickly made eye contact with his wife. She understood and started to speak tactfully. "Ethan, it's normal to not be used to some places since you haven't been in Paris for long. Why don't you share your worries with us? We can help you come up with a solution or give some advice." "Okay." Looking at his parents' concerned expressions, Ethan's depressed mood improved slightly. He picked up a glass of juice and took a sip. He hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. "I ran into Serena Song at the apartment door when I was coming back from work. She's my ex-girlfriend." Hearing this, Ethan's dad's brow furrowed and he slammed his hand on the table. Is this woman a stalker? She's still pestering you even after you've broken up. After you finish eating, take Dad to find her. I'll have to teach her a lesson. That sound startled the mother and son. Ethan quickly reached out to hold his dad. She wasn't pestering me. It's just that I wasn't happy when I saw her. I don't know why she moved into an apartment near me. Dad, calm down. Ethan's mom, who had been watching her son's expression, suddenly asked a very important question. Why did you and her break up? Those words made Ethan silent again. His mind was working fast. In the end, he vaguely explained the reason. She had a male friend that she had grown up with, and they were very close. I felt that they had gone beyond a normal friendship. I didn't want to waste my time on her, so I proposed breaking up. Hearing this, his parents opened their eyes wide. Ethan's dad tapped his fist on the table again. What male friends? Friendship? There's no such thing as pure friendship between a man and a woman. She was being unfaithful and being two-timing you. It's good that you broke up. Dad supports you. His mom also nodded in agreement. Your dad's right. As long as she's involved with other men, even if she's amazing, you have to break up with her. It's better to get out of it sooner to prevent bigger problems from happening in the future. You would have been even more hurt if that had happened. I know. That's why I went abroad after we broke up. It was to completely end this relationship. But I don't know why she followed me here. So I'm a little worried. Ethan's dad, who was always so straightforward, felt a pang of heartache when he saw his son frowning. He advised him to directly call her. His mom also felt that instead of worrying on his own, he should just ask her. With his parents' encouragement, Ethan picked up his phone and dialed the number that was just a string of digits. Within 3 seconds, the phone was picked up. Serena's surprised voice came from the phone. Ethan. Being in front of his parents while talking to his ex-girlfriend made Ethan's palms sweat nervously. But under their knowing glances, he still mustered his courage and asked. There's no other reason for this call. I just want to ask you why you suddenly came to Paris? Don't you like Liam? Chapter 22. Serena thought for a long time before answering his question. I did like him, but that's all in the past. After being with you, I slowly fell in love with you. I only see him as a friend. Hearing the word friend, the image of them kissing in the haunted house flashed through Ethan's mind. Did platonic friends do that? A sarcastic smile appeared on his lips. If Liam hadn't come back to the country, I would still be living in my own world, thinking that your love was that cold and restrained. You say that you like me, but I can't feel your love at all. All I can see is how much you care about and protect Liam. If your love for him is just that of a friend, then my love for you is probably not even that of a friend. Serena, stop lying to yourself. You've never loved me. Hearing Ethan say these words, his parents looked at each other. Both of them could see shock and heartache in each other's eyes. Just from those few words, the couple could vaguely guess that the hurt their son had suffered in this relationship was much heavier than he had described. Serena on the other end of the line was speechless. She couldn't say a word. Ethan also didn't think that he would end up saying all the things that had been bottled up in his heart. He turned his head and saw that his parents had strange expressions. He quickly tried to clarify his stance. On the day we broke up, I threw all the feelings that I had for you into the trash can. It doesn't matter to me who you like now. I just want to tell you that we might have had a past, but there will definitely be no future. After speaking those cold words, Ethan didn't give her another chance to speak and hung up. Then, he put on a relieved smile and winked at his parents. Was my response cool? Did it have your flair? The couple's eyes had become a little red. They immediately pulled their son into a hug. Very cool. Mom and Dad love your straightforwardness, but we also hope that if you run into sad things in the future, don't keep them to yourself. Share it with us, okay? Hearing his mom's choked voice, tears also filled Ethan's eyes. It's all in the past. I only see her as a stranger now. I'm not sad at all. Don't worry about me. Seeing how sensible his son was, the couple felt even more self-reproach. It's all our fault for insisting on going abroad back then. We left you to go to school alone. If we had stayed with you, you wouldn't have encountered these awful things. Hearing his parents bring up the past, Ethan slapped his leg a couple of times, putting on a regretful look. You can't blame yourselves for this. It was me who was blinded by beauty and refused to go abroad with you. If I had listened to you earlier, then none of this would have happened. It's true that you shouldn't ignore the advice of your elders. Looking at how mature his son was pretending to be, his parents were amused and their sadness turned to laughter. They pinched his cheeks. Now you know that your mom and dad are good, right? You have to listen to the advice of us two old people in the future. Don't be so rash anymore. I will obey my father and mother's orders. Chapter 23. After making that phone call, other than the occasional encounter in the elevator or the hallway, Ethan rarely saw Serena. She would always step forward to say hello, but Ethan never responded. He would pretend that he hadn't seen her and just walked past. Seeing how quickly he tried to avoid her, Serena's eyes would always fill with loneliness. She would always be down for a long time. But the next time they met, she would still put on a smile and greet him. The days moved forward calmly. Other than that slightly annoying neighbor, Ethan's life was still smooth. The summer heat gradually dissipated, and his internship was also drawing to a close. Ethan worked on finishing up his projects, while also preparing for school. Every day he was busy with many things. This day after work, he thought that it was almost autumn, so he wanted to buy a few coats. So he went to a shop by himself. After picking out a few that fit him and paying, he decided to take a shortcut home through an alley. Ethan had always worn headphones and a baseball cap, immersed in his own world. He didn't notice the two foreigners following behind him. It wasn't until he was deep in the alley, and the two men held a knife up to him that he realized that he was being robbed. There was no one else around. Faced with the cold glimmering blade, he didn't dare say a word. He obediently handed over the things in his hands and his wallet. The two tall robbers grabbed the items and ran out. Ethan was so scared that he felt weak all over. He was leaning against the wall, panting for air, when a figure suddenly ran past him. He thought something bad was going to happen again. He hurriedly looked up to assess the situation. He saw Serena chasing after the two robbers. When she caught up, she grabbed the shoulder of the robber who was lagging behind and snatched back the wallet. The robber cursed a few times and started fighting Serena. His companion heard the noise and quickly turned around to help. They started wrestling. Ethan thought of that knife. He was still terrified, afraid that someone would get hurt. He hurriedly turned and yelled for the police in the alley. The two robbers were indeed startled by his actions and were getting ready to escape. But Serena grabbed one of them and refused to let go. This robber happened to have a knife. In a panic state, he didn't hold back. He stabbed her in the abdomen. Writhing in pain, Serena finally let go. The two robbers kicked her before fleeing. Seeing her fall to the ground, Ethan's heart clenched. He rushed over to her. Watching her tightly clutching her abdomen, her hands covered in blood, Ethan's mind went blank. His hands trembling, he took out his phone and dialed the emergency number. Serena bit her lip tightly, trying her best to keep her tired eyes open as she looked up at him. She kept telling herself not to fall asleep. Seeing her face slowly turn pale, Ethan felt like his heart was about to jump out of his chest. His eyes were full of panic and anxiety. He kept calling out her name, as he pulled out the new scarf from the bag that the robbers had dropped and gave it to her to stop the bleeding. Time moved incredibly slowly. The strength of a person's will couldn't overcome physical reactions. Having lost too much blood, Serena couldn't hold on any longer. The moment she fainted, she heard the sound of an ambulance coming from outside of the alley. Ethan jumped up from the ground and ran towards the source of the sound, waving his arms and shouting to make sure that the medical staff knew where they were. Looking at that blurry figure that was moving further away, Serena heard the thump-thump of her heartbeat. The feeling of weakness that was coming from all over her body made her unable to fight back against her heavy eyelids any longer. She closed her eyes with a smile on her face. Chapter 24. The knife that Serena had been stabbed with didn't injure a vital area. And thanks to receiving treatment in time, her life was not in danger. After hearing the news that she was safe, Ethan's tense nerves finally relaxed. After calling his parents to explain the situation, he returned to the hospital room. He let out a sigh of relief as he looked at Serena, who was still unconscious. On the table lay the blood-stained wallet and bag. Looking at the crimson color, he couldn't help but think back to the dangerous scene from before. Then, looking at that pale-as-paper face on the hospital bed, Ethan's mood instantly became incredibly complex. He had been robbed on his way home from work, and she just happened to be nearby? Had she been following him? Why hadn't he noticed anything? Ethan was caught in this dilemma for half an hour, when his parents finally arrived. After discussing it with his family, his mom stayed at the hospital to take care of Serena, while his dad accompanied his son to the police station to report the crime. After they finished making their statements, the father and son immediately received news that Serena had woken up. They rushed back to the hospital together. His mom was sitting outside of the hospital room. She made eye contact with Ethan, signaling him to go in and take a look. His dad also wanted to go in, but his mom grabbed him. He could only watch as his son bravely entered the lion's den, his brow furrowed. After patting his heart and calming himself down, Ethan pushed open the door. The moment his figure appeared, Serena's eyes seemed to be glued to him. She didn't even blink. Faced with her intense gaze, Ethan felt very uncomfortable. He could only lower his eyes to look at the floor as he walked over to the bedside. He sincerely said thank you. Seeing that he was still standing, Serena was afraid that he would leave right away. So she propped herself up, trying to move the chair nearby closer, but she accidentally pulled her wound. Her entire face twisted in pain. Ethan was startled by her movements and expression. He thought that the wound had opened up. He turned to go call the nurse. Serena quickly stopped him with a hoarse voice. "I'm fine. I just pulled at my wound and it hurts a bit." Hearing that her voice was relatively calm, Ethan hesitated, before turning back and asking again, "Are you sure you're all right?" Serena nodded and laid back down on the bed. She pointed at the chair, signaling him to sit down. Ethan obediently sat down. He subconsciously glanced at her abdomen, making sure there was no bleeding before calming down. After going through this near-death experience, Serena had finally seen the Ethan Joe who wouldn't ignore her again. She felt like the stab wound was worth it. She couldn't help but smile. As Ethan was thinking about how he should start the conversation, he lifted his eyes and saw her smile. He paused. His face had an indescribable, subtle expression. "You just went through the gates of hell. How can you still be smiling?" Serena naturally wouldn't tell him what she was really thinking. She explained softly, "I'm happy that you are finally willing to talk to me. Ethan, you haven't looked at me even once these past few days. I was so sad." So she was smiling because of that. Ethan was a bit speechless. They had knives and only wanted to steal some money and clothes. Why did you have to chase them? If that knife had been aimed a little differently, you probably wouldn't have survived. Ethan's tone was filled with lingering fear. But to Serena's ears, it only sounded like he was filled with concern. The smile on her face became even more unrestrained. She was a little carried away and spoke without holding back. "Are you worried about me?" Chapter 25. Ethan didn't expect that she would twist his meaning like that. A look of shock appeared in his eyes. "I was asking if you didn't want your life." Serena looked at him without blinking. Her eyes filled with a gentle light. Her voice was firm as she said, "If it's for you, I can give up this life." Ethan had never expected to hear such cheesy words coming from Serena. If it had been a few months ago, he would probably have been moved to tears. But now all he felt was silent resignation. Seeing that he wasn't speaking, Serena couldn't help but speak again. "They didn't hurt you, did they? I was too late. Were you scared?" Hearing this, Ethan remembered the question that he had been struggling with before going to the police station. He started to look at her with a strange expression. "Why were you following behind me? It can't just be a coincidence, can it?" Serena hadn't expected him to ask this so suddenly. Her mind went blank, and she didn't know how to reply. The silence seemed to confirm Ethan's suspicions. The look of doubt on his face grew even more intense. Serena, seeing that, felt a little apprehensive. Afraid that he would get angry again and ignore her, she had no choice but to tell him the truth. "My company is right across from your building. After I finished work today, I saw that you had changed your route. I followed you to see where you were going. I didn't expect to witness you being robbed." I was worried that your wallet had important documents, so I thought of helping you get it back. But I didn't expect them to have knives. As she spoke, she paid attention to his expression. Seeing that he had gone back to his expressionless face, she hurriedly apologized. I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't intentionally follow you. Did you only follow me today, or have you been following me all along? Faced with his question, Serena hesitated for a while. She still wanted to try to excuse herself. It can't really be considered following, right? It's just that we leave work at the same time. So I just happened to arrive home right behind you. So, she had been following him for 2 or 3 months. No wonder he would run into her every now and then. So, everything was premeditated. Ethan couldn't help but feel annoyed with himself for being so careless. He glanced at the anxious-looking Serena. His tone wasn't friendly. I've already made myself very clear, right? No matter what you do, I won't agree to reconcile. Hearing those words again from him, the little bit of confidence that Serena had managed to gather shattered. The light in her eyes instantly dimmed. Her voice was low. I know. I didn't want to force you to be with me. I just wanted to stay by your side. Can you please not chase me away? Hearing her distressed tone, Ethan really didn't know what to say. He lowered his head and thought of the past. Wasn't Serena naturally cold and aloof, and stingy with words when she spoke? How could she now make him fall silent just by speaking a few words? Seeing that she was about to say something again, the goosebumps on Ethan's skin stood up. He quickly spoke first. You're injured and need to be hospitalized. Aren't you going to contact your family? Serena vaguely guessed what he was going to say next. Her mind spun through several possibilities. My family is very busy with work. I'm afraid they wouldn't have the time to fly over to take care of me. Hearing this, Ethan's face showed a look of confusion. Her daughter had been injured and stabbed, and her parents wouldn't come to see her? Chapter 26. Seeing that he didn't believe her, Serena hurriedly tried to make up for it. Actually, the reason why I'm so aloof is because my parents have been very busy with their careers and haven't taken good care of me. They are constantly traveling for business meetings, and sometimes they don't come back to see me for a month. This time the injury isn't serious, so they probably won't come. Seeing that she didn't show the same kind of lying expression from before, Ethan believed her somewhat. Then, aren't you going to tell Liam? Hearing him ask that, Serena became anxious. She was eager to prove again that her relationship with Liam was completely innocent. He's not really that concerned about me. It's just that I liked him too much back then. He enjoyed the way that I favored him, and that's why he kept so close to me. Hearing her say that, Ethan was surprised. So Serena was similar to him. She was also the one who was humbly giving in the relationship. Thinking about how she chased after Liam, and Liam still ignored her, Ethan suddenly felt a sense of vindication. The wicked would be punished by the wicked. He couldn't help but laugh. But thinking of the setting, he still managed to hold it in. He picked up the things on the table and said coldly, You were injured because you were trying to save me. So, I'll be responsible for your hospital expenses. Just focus on getting better. I'm leaving now. Serena had wanted to try to keep him here. But after hearing what he had said, she responded with a surprised smile. I'll focus on getting better and wait for you to come. Ethan didn't reply to her. He quickly left the hospital room. Under Serena's full expectations, Ethan's mom came in with a thermos. Her hopes for the night were dashed. Looking at the older woman, Serena's expression instantly disappeared. She asked cautiously about Ethan's whereabouts. Auntie, where is Ethan? Ethan's mom put the things she had brought on the table and glanced at her. Ethan's at work. He doesn't have time to come see you. I'll come instead from now on. Tell me what you need. Hearing those words, Serena's heart immediately sank to the bottom. Her tone was also low. Is he very busy? Does he really not have time to come? Having seen how she had risked her life to save her son, Ethan's mom had changed her opinion of Serena slightly, but not by much. She unscrewed the lid, took out the chicken soup and handed it to her. He doesn't have time to come even when he's not busy. After all, you are his ex-girlfriend. He has no feelings for you anymore. Seeing you will just make him feel annoyed. Serena knew that his mom was telling the truth. but she still couldn't accept it in her heart. A hint of despondency flashed in her eyes. I didn't want to bother him. I just can't let go of the past. I just want to try again. Although she didn't know what had happened between the two young people, remembering her son's expression from before, Ethan's mom's heart was as hard as iron. She directly said the words that were on her mind. Whatever happened in the past, it's all in the past. My son has a kind nature. As long as it's not something that was too much, he would always leave some room. But this time he made up his mind to cut ties with you. That means that the problems between the two of you must have exceeded his limit. If you really cared about him, how could you have let the problems escalate to such a serious degree? Faced with Ethan's mom's question, Serena knew that she was in the wrong. She couldn't come up with a single explanation. Your fate with him has already run out. Don't force it anymore. If you continue to pester him, it will only make him hate you even more. Lovers have turned into strangers. Do you really want to become enemies? Listen to my advice and live your own life well. Chapter 27. How could Serena not know that Ethan's mom was right? She had also tried to persuade herself many times. But as soon as she closed her eyes, her mind would replay the memories of her and Ethan together. For most of her life, she had always longed for someone who could treat her wholeheartedly. She had once thought that that person was Liam, but all he wanted was to be friends. And when Ethan left, she realized that that person had already appeared. But his heart had been broken by her. The guilt and regret that she felt had completely overpowered her rationality. She only wanted to save this relationship and keep him by her side. But reality told Serena that everything she was doing would only push Ethan further and further away. At that moment she felt lost, pained, conflicted, and desperate. On one side was the persistence that was rooted deep in her bones, and on the other side was the act of letting go that was based on logical thinking. She couldn't make up her mind. Seeing that she seemed to be persuaded, Ethan's mom continued to speak. You're both still young. You haven't experienced too many things and you haven't met too many people. So that's why you're stuck in a relationship that should have ended. Don't keep following Ethan. You will only be holding him back, and it will also be holding back your future. Actually, life is very long and wide. Instead of wasting your energy in the past, it's better to look forward. During Serena's hospitalization, Ethan only went to see her once, before the start of school. She didn't know what exactly had happened during this period, but she seemed to be a completely different person. She no longer had her previous aloofness, nor did she have that same stubbornness as before. After breaking up, the two of them were finally able to sit together and have a peaceful conversation. The topics were no longer limited to love and relationships. They started to talk about the future. Serena told him that she had decided to return to her country to continue her studies after she recovered. She wouldn't stay in Paris anymore. Hearing her say this, Ethan finally let out a sigh of relief and gave her his best wishes. With your qualifications, you should indeed stay in the country to develop. I wish you a bright future, and that everything goes well. Seeing that Ethan was finally smiling, Serena's lips also curved into a smile. What about you? Are you going to continue to study design? Ethan nodded. That's good. Staying in Europe for further studies will give you more opportunities. You should also do your best. I look forward to seeing your designs in magazines in the future. The two chatted for a few more sentences. Ethan looked out the window. He noticed that it was about to get dark, so he stood up to leave. Watching his figure walk away, Serena felt a slight pain in her heart again. She couldn't help but call out to him. Ethan. Hearing her voice, Ethan turned his head to look at her. He looked surprised. Is there anything else? Serena hesitated for a moment, before asking the question that she had been hiding in her heart. Are we considered friends now? Ethan tilted his head and thought for a moment. Then, he gave her a rather uncertain answer. I guess so. A bright smile bloomed on Serena's face again. She raised her hand to wave goodbye. With a thud, the door to the hospital room closed. The light in the room also dimmed a little. Serena looked out the window. She saw the sun hanging low on the mountaintop. Large patches of dark clouds were covering up the warmth. She closed her eyes, her face filled with a sense of loss. All that was left was a soft mutter. The sun has set. The end.